I'm Mrs. Natalie Watson, age 29, residing in a cozy apartment with my husband. Our 3-year marriage has generally been harmonious, though lately discontent has crept into my heart. It's not solely directed at my husband but also extends to his parents. The bond between my husband and his parents is strong, evidenced by our weekly visits to their home. Initially, I admired his filial devotion. However, during these visits, a recurring theme emerges: my in-laws' persistent inquiry. Natalie, when will you leave your job? A woman's place is in the home. Over time, my aversion to visiting their home deepened. I find fulfillment in my current job and wish to continue working for as long as possible, a sentiment I expressed to my husband even before we tied the knot. Yet when his parents berate me, my husband remains indifferent, avoiding eye contact as if the matter is inconsequential to him. The thought of going to my in-laws' place fills me with dread, prompting me to sometimes suggest to my husband, "Why don't you go alone?" Yet he insists, "My parents want to see you too," forcing me into accompanying him. Eventually, I surrendered to his persistence, resigning myself to the routine. Expressing my sentiments directly to his parents seemed daunting, fearing it might wound my husband's sentiments. Hence, I found myself unable to articulate these thoughts to them, for fear of causing any distress to him. Instead, I resorted to smiling and deflecting their remarks whenever they arose. Though my husband's apathy troubled me, the inquiries from his parents about our childlessness irked me the most. While I cherish the idea of parenthood and the joy children bring, conceiving isn't a matter one can simply will into existence. It's a delicate process, not subject to mere desire. Initially, the notion of having a child solely to appease his parents baffled me. Frankly, I yearned for them to respect my boundaries and cease their incessant prodding. I confided in my husband about my feelings regarding this matter. His response was dismissive, assuring me, "Don't fret, you're just overthinking it," yet took no action. As my vexation mounted, fueled by both my husband's lack of support and my solitary struggle, a breaking point emerged when my mother-in-law uttered words that cut deep. With a callousness I couldn't fathom, she questioned, "Are you unable to conceive, given that you've yet to bear a child?" Adding to the distress, my father-in-law regarded me with suspicion, accusing, "Did you conceal your infertility and marry our son?" The accusation was a final straw. While I had endured their scrutiny with a smile, until then, I found my tolerance wearing thin. Confronting them, I declared, "I'm willing to pursue infertility treatment. In return, can you refrain from revisiting this topic?" Surprised by my own assertiveness, I realized the weight of my pent-up frustration. Unexpectedly, my previously silent husband interjected, his voice resolute. "I don't believe fertility treatments are necessary. We're still young, and there's no rush to start a family. Besides, such treatments entail financial strain. I value our time together as a couple," he affirmed to his parents. At that moment, I interpreted my husband's words to align with my own desires, convincing myself that his consideration was genuine. One weekday, I took a day off from work and made my way to the gynecologist's office. Although the pressure from my in-laws about starting a family had lessened, I wanted certainty about my fertility status. Initially, I contemplated discussing the matter with my husband. However, his mood soared whenever the topic of infertility treatments arose, prompting me to handle the examination alone. The appointment concluded sooner than anticipated, and I secured a follow-up appointment for the results a week later. As I exited the office, my gaze met that of a pregnant woman seated in the waiting room. Familiar face halted me in my tracks. Sensing my recognition, she approached me. "Are you Natalie?" she inquired. Confirming our identities, we exchanged nods, realizing we were former classmates from elementary and middle school. Clara's swollen belly indicated she was nearing her due date. Having just completed her routine checkup, I'd offered to accompany her home. To my surprise, Clara lived in close proximity to my own residence. What astonished me even more was discovering that her husband and mine were colleagues at the same company. As we caught up on our lives and reminisced about our school days, my attention naturally gravitated towards Claire's pronounced belly. Sensing my curiosity, she extended an invitation. "Would you like to feel?" Hesitant, I inquired, "Is that all right?" With a warm smile, she reassured, "Of course." Gently, I placed my hand on Claire's abdomen. In my recollection, Claire boasted a slender figure with a trim waist, but now her body had blossomed with the presence of new life. A sense of awe washed over me as I realized there truly was a baby growing within her. As I kept my hand on her belly, I felt a faint fluttering beneath my fingertips. Startled, I glanced up at Claire. Did you feel that? I asked. Yes, it's been moving a lot lately, she confirmed, her expression radiant with maternal joy. In that moment, Claire exuded the aura of a contented mother-to-be. Before I could stop myself, the words slipped out, I'm envious. Instantly, I regretted my candidness, averting my gaze from Claire. Sensing my discomfort, Claire, attuned to others' emotions, gently probed, if I'm mistaken, I apologize, but is something troubling you? Reluctant at first, I hesitated to divulge my troubles. However, sensing Claire's sincerity, I realized I couldn't mask my feelings from her perceptive eyes. Thus, I opened up about the challenges I faced with my in-laws and the longing for children. Once I began sharing, the floodgates opened, and I poured out everything, even detailing the fertility tests I underwent earlier that day at the clinic. As I poured out my thoughts to Claire, a strange sense of relief mingled with lingering anxiety. Despite initial reservations, I found solace in confiding in her, perhaps driven by an urgent need to unburden myself after years of pent-up frustrations. Throughout my narrative, Claire simply nodded, offering a quiet, attentive presence. Upon concluding my tale, Claire remarked, You've shouldered this burden for so long. Your endurance is remarkable. If it were me, I might have severed ties with my in-laws. Reflecting on her words, I admitted, I hadn't realized the extent of my stress until now. Sharing with you has brought some relief, Claire, and knowing my husband supports me is a small comfort. Despite my attempt at levity, Claire's demeanor remained somber. I was taken aback by Claire's expression, unsure of the reason behind her solemn demeanor. Calling out her name, I urged her to share her thoughts. With evident reluctance, she finally spoke, her words laced with hesitation. It's regarding your husband. Perhaps, for now, it's best not to disclose the details of the test, she murmured. Confusion clouded my thoughts as I blinked in disbelief at Claire's unexpected caution. I pressed her for an explanation, prompting her to reveal something utterly astonishing. Struggling to comprehend Claire's revelation, I made my way home with faltering steps. Seated on the sofa, I dwelled on her words, grappling with disbelief and uncertainty. While part of me resisted accepting the truth, Claire's sincerity left little room for doubt. Moreover, recent doubts about my husband's behavior intensified my turmoil. If Claire's claim held any truth, I couldn't fathom forgiving him. Determined to uncover the truth, I seized the opportunity during a visit to my in-laws. Amidst tea and snacks, my mother-in-law broached the familiar topic of my job. Unlike before, this time, my response harbored a newfound resolve. I suppose I'll consider quitting when we have a child, I responded. My mother-in-law blinked in surprise, remarking, So, you've decided to start a family. Excitement lit up my father-in-law's face as he eagerly exclaimed, Ah, will I finally get to hold a grandchild? However, my husband, after a brief glance at my expression, adopted a restrained demeanor, cautioning, Well, parenthood is a blessing, but timing is uncertain. As anticipated, my husband's reaction followed the script I had predicted. Meeting his gaze, I disclosed, Actually, I had a recent appointment with the gynecologist, presenting him with the results of my infertility test. The report indicates no issues, I informed him preemptively. I'm beginning to feel the desire for a child as well. Will you support me for the sake of your parents? My husband's gaze flickered between the test results and my face, his complexion flushing crimson as he erupted. I refuse to undergo any infertility treatments. I won't even get tested. His sudden outburst left his parents stunned, but I couldn't suppress my disappointment, realizing Claire's words were indeed true. By the way, do you know Mr. Howard? I inquired, noting my husband's surprised expression. With a sense of foreboding, I revealed what I had learned, awaiting his reaction. His wife happens to be a friend of mine. Apparently, you've been making disparaging remarks at work, claiming, my wife is defective, unable to conceive due to infertility. She's abandoned her femininity to focus solely on work, and I'm the pitiful one for marrying her. As I leveled him with a gaze icy with disappointment, my husband's lips quivered, his demeanor defensive. And what if it is true? He retorted, his tone laced with defiance. Who else would want someone like you? His words, filled with scorn, struck me like a blow, causing the warmth I once felt for him to dwindle. Maintaining my composure, I gestured towards the test results lying on the table. I've just proven there's no issue on my end, haven't I? I remarked calmly. Despite his silence, I couldn't shake off a nagging suspicion that had lingered in the recesses of my mind. Could it be that the problem lies with you? I ventured, voicing the troubling thought that had plagued me. Is that why you've adamantly refused infertility treatments and testing? At that moment, my previously silent mother-in-law interjected sharply. That's impossible. There's no way my son could have any issues. If there's a problem, it must be with you, she asserted vehemently, her face flushing with indignation. In a sudden burst of anger, she seized the test results from the table and declared, "These must be fabricated," before tearing them to shreds. My husband's initial surprise quickly gave way to alignment with his mother's sentiments. "Yeah, she's right. There's no way it could have any issues," he affirmed, joining in the accusatory chorus. With their combined blame raining down on me, I realized the futility of continuing the discussion. In a decisive move, I slammed the prepared divorce papers onto the table, signifying the end of our feudal union. "Then please proceed with the divorce, and perhaps you'll find a far superior wife than myself," I declared calmly, my resolve unwavering. In response, my husband retorted, "Yeah, that's right. I'll find someone much better than you," his words dripping with anger as they hastily filled out the divorce papers. Surprisingly, his parents offered no objection to his decision. As I watched dispassionately while the divorce papers were completed, a sense of liberation washed over me, realizing I was severing ties with the trio before me. Once the last signature was affixed, I swiftly snatched the papers, bidding a curt goodbye before swiftly departing from my in-laws' home. Though I thought I heard a voice calling after me, it was likely just my imagination. I swiftly made my way to City Hall and promptly filed the divorce papers. Within a matter of days, I efficiently relocated from the apartment we once shared to my company's dormitory, having long prepared for this inevitable step. Given that I was the sole lessee of the apartment, the transition proceeded without a hitch. As for my ex-husband's belongings, I packed them into cardboard boxes and arranged for them to be delivered to his parents' residence with payment upon receipt. Settling into my new life at the company dormitory, I was taken aback when I received a call from my ex-husband. Curious as to his intentions, I answered the phone, only to be met with a barrage of accusations. "Why did you file for divorce? And why did you vacate the apartment?" he demanded angrily. Perplexed by his sudden outcry, I responded calmly, "Let's not play games. You agreed to the divorce and signed the papers, didn't you? As for the apartment, I've moved out because it's no longer necessary, considering our divorce and my sole responsibility for the lease." Despite my attempts to reason with him, my ex-husband remained obstinate. "Revoke the divorce. Let's start anew with marriage papers. Where are you staying now? Let's reunite," he persisted, spouting increasingly ludicrous proposals. Exasperated, I reached my limit and declared, "Enough. I'm ending this call. Do not contact me again." Attempting to terminate the conversation, I prepared to disconnect, only to be met with a threat from my ex. "If you won't disclose your location, I'll visit your workplace," he warned ominously. At wit's end, I sternly retorted, "Any disruptions you cause will only reflect poorly on you," before abruptly ending the call. Despite my hopes that he wouldn't resort to drastic measures, I took precautions and confided in my boss about my ex-husband. Neither my boss nor I anticipated any trouble, but to our dismay, he caused a disturbance at the company. I was mortified to learn from the security guard that he had caused a scene in the lobby, necessitating police intervention. Filled with shame and regret, I found solace in the empathy of my coworkers who reassured me that ending the relationship was the right choice. Later, I was informed by Claire's husband that my ex-husband had attempted to shift blame onto me when news of the police incident reached his workplace. Thankfully, Claire's husband set the record straight, exposing the falsehoods my ex-husband had been spreading about me. It appears he struggled to continue working at the company and ultimately resigned. Chances are, my now unemployed ex-husband has returned to his parents' home, seeking solace from them. Though it might evoke some pity, supporting a jobless and divorced son could prove challenging for them. Nevertheless, his situation no longer concerns me as he's become a stranger. Since then, I've enjoyed a life free from unnecessary stress, dedicating my days to work. With more time and resources at my disposal, I occasionally visit Claire to check on her and make plans to spoil her baby. She often finds my gestures amusing, shaking her head at my antics. As for remarriage, it's not something I can consider at the moment. However, I hold on to the hope that one day I'll have the opportunity to build a happy family of my own.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.